Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Justin Brock here with Medicare Gurus, and today I have a hell of a guest, a longtime friend of mine now. We've communicated online for a long time, met each other in person finally at the Power Players Retreat well over a year ago now, I think. And we have just hit it off. Just a really good guy, pioneer in the industry, doing a whole lot of great things. And to continue what we've been trying to do in these interviews is we want to kind of hit on the backstory of how people got into the insurance industry, because it's a weird industry to end up in a lot of times. You know, it's not like people grow up thinking I'm going to be an insurance agent, but a lot of people find a home in it and find a very comfortable home in it. So want to start off by giving my little intro of Ron. Ron is a longtime veteran of the police force. He has a Master of Peace certificate from the state of Texas. He is, a patriot. You know, he's had a lot of service in that aspect, and then he has transitioned into his insurance career and built a great agency. Is also now building a home healthcare agency too. So Ron is a vertical integrator. It's what I just learned this term, so I'm using the hell out of it right now. He's a vertical integrator. So what that means is Ron will start one path, and let's say it's Medicare, and then he'll realize, hey, financial is a good secondary, niche where I can cross sell. But hey, tax planning, estate planning, home healthcare, these are all things that I have a client base that has another need, and I'm going to refer them to somewhere else. But you know what? Some of these I think I could create and do a better job, and then I could get the revenue from it. So that's called vertical integration. And some people are completely against it and laser focused into riches and niches. And some people are focused on, well, let me master one niche, get it kind of on autopilot, and then start to build out these other vertical integrations. So he has done that. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to bring it all the way back to, his time as a police officer and try to figure out how this transition happened into the insurance industry. So Ron, you give us the high level overview of that time in your life, man.
Yeah, that was a great time when I got into that. I started actually sales was my first job. I actually while I was still in high school, I started a company selling products to like mom and pop meat markets, meat packing houses, selling them all their knives and tools and paper, butcher paper and freezer paper and bags and everything that they could possibly need. And I actually did pretty well with that, just kind of in my little rural community, because every little town has a little meat market in it. And so that's kind of where my sales career started. But that was just enough to get me to, out of high school and going to a local community college for a couple of years until I was old enough to go to the police academy, because that's what I knew I wanted to do. So no reason to waste any more time in college. Just go and start your career. So that's what I did. I went to the police academy and got out of that, got my first job, and I'm in policing. And did that full-time on the road for about 6 years. And then I transferred over to the academy and was an academy instructor for another 6 or 7 years, and moved up through the ranks at the academy and was actually the acting academy manager when I left, the commander. And but that's believe it or not, academy training, and especially managing an academy, is a pretty stressful job, more stressful probably than being on the street. At least at that time. And so I got a little burned out on that. And it also was, in that phase of my life where I wanted to get married and start a family, and also not have to wear a bulletproof vest to work every day. So I walked away from that one day. In fact, it was in October of 2008, which, if you don't know what was going on in October of 2008, probably the worst time in history ever to walk out on a good government job.
Yeah.
Because everybody was laying people off by the hundreds of thousands every week, and that was the beginning of the Great Recession, and it was pretty tough. There was no job market. So I sat around for a couple of months and just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I got a call out of the blue. I had not put a resume out. I don't know how this guy got a hold of me, but it was a recruiter from a company called Bankers Life and Casualty. And he gave me his pitch, telling me how great Medicare was. And this is 2008. How great Medicare was, and Medicare supplements and residual income, and you can make $100,000 working 20 hours a week. And so I thought that sounds pretty good. So I went to his little group interview, kind of like, what's that movie with Ben Affleck, Boiler Room?
Boiler Room.
Yeah, where they have that little group interview. It wasn't quite that blunt, but it was, I got the message, right? So I stuck around and did pretty well there for the short time I was there. One thing I'll say about Bankers Life is they have some really, really good training and a good program, sales program, right? So sales process, I should say.
Yeah.
And how to and really go take a lot of steps to teach you really a good fact-finding process, which is kind of where I hang my hat nowadays. But it's a captive program. You know, you're only allowed to sell one company's products, and in a world where MedSups, you know, it's apples to apples. In most cases, people are buying on price alone. You know, it's hard to sell something that costs more than the independent guy down the street who has access to 40 different products that are all the same. So I didn't know that there was actually something called an independent insurance world. And another recruiter from one of these big, you know, individual health FMOs gave me a call and was telling me all about how to sell individual under 65 health over the phone with internet leads. And at that time, it was still a good market, a good way to, you know, make a good living. And so I started doing that. I left Bankers Life, started doing that, and struggled for quite a while. You know, I'm not one of these that, you know, went out and made $100,000 like the Bankers Life recruiter told me I could. You know, my first year working 20 hours a week, that was not true. Yeah. You know, the working 20 hours a week, that comes up, you know, when you've been working for 20 years and you've got all those residuals, you know, you've got a couple thousand policies on the books, then you can cut it back to 20 hours a week. Maybe it's not 20 years, but maybe it's 3 or 4 or 5 years or 10 years, you know, depending on your drive and how hard you want to work. But at that time, I wanted to work, but I wanted to be able to control my life a little bit more and do a little bit better job for my clients. So, you know, I struggled, and it was tough. You know, had a fiance and a you know, that was working hard and making a good living, but saw me go from making a good living to making almost nothing, and was getting a little impatient. And so I ended up having an opportunity to take an active duty assignment with the Texas Guard, and went and worked border security and border intelligence for a while. And then came back from that assignment and started getting back into Medicare, because I knew that there was something to that. Everything that guy at Bankers Life told me was true. It's just that in that captive situation, your capacity is limited. So I got back into Medicare and started selling that, but still trying to, you know, do it myself over the phone, not really knowing what I was doing, not having a good process for selling over the phone, trying to duplicate what I was taught at Bankers Life, selling over the phone, you know, and across the state. And I didn't really have anybody to teach me how to do it, because I was literally on my own. At that time, I'm not even sure Facebook was a thing. I mean, it was a thing, but there were no groups. There was nothing. There
was no ads either. You couldn't, I mean, it was an unmonetized inception platform at the time.
Right. So the only place that an independent agent could go besides their upline, which we all know how uplines are as far as training goes. Some of them are good, but most of them are bad at that. The only place you could go was like an internet forum, like the old style bulletin board forums. And there was this one called Insurance Agents Forum. I don't get the exact address wrong, but you could go on there and ask a question and 10 people, flame you for being stupid. And why are you asking a newbie question in here? And,
well, they would, I know the forums you're talking about because that's some of the places I started learning, and they hide behind screen names and not having to face, the facts. One thing, there's keyboard warriors on Facebook, but typically they're at least have their real name on there. So, you separate the men from the boys when the ones that actually wanted to come and start participating when they had to use their real name. So,
but that was just a toxic cesspool, and you could find a couple of people that wanted to be helpful and actually help. So I found a guy named Frank Stasny on there, and he taught me. He died now. He's passed away several years ago, but he's well known for being one of the pioneers of selling Medicare supplements over the phone, and specifically replacing policies, from that age 68 to, say 75, when they hit that first good rate increase at age 68. And he had a little CRM that he developed that was a Microsoft Access database. And you could pay him $300 to buy his CRM, and he would give you the training on how he runs his system. And so that was my first course that I bought, and I've been addicted to online courses ever since. Going to courses and conferences and training. Of course, I have a training background anyway with teaching at the police academy and public speaking. So I did that. I still struggled for a little while and ended up going on active duty again, and came back and finally just had to, we're going to have to do something with this, or I'm going to go back, and be a patrolman somewhere else again. Cause we got one more shot at insurance to make it work. And then I'm going to give up on it. And so one of my Medicare FMOs was talking to him, and he said, why don't you just do seminars? I've got this guy up here. He does seminars. He does great. He's got more business that he can do than he can handle. Why don't you go watch him do a seminar and see if that's something you want to do? And so I thought about it. I'm a teacher anyway. That's what I've been doing for the last 7 years, is standing up in front of a classroom full of people and teaching them. So I can do a seminar.
Right.
So I drove up there. I watched him do it, and the rest is history.
Yep. Well, we know the seminars are working for you, and that's a huge thing. I want to take it back to when you were talking about October 2008. So I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and years later, I watched The Big Short.
Yep.
Talked about the housing market crisis. But I lived in Jacksonville, North Carolina at the time. And in Jacksonville, North Carolina, there was no recession because there were, 50,000 Marines there that were all being paid by the government, and housing allowances paid by the government. So the housing market was great. Everything was great. I didn't even know any of that was going on. So you're completely right. Like when you're working for the government in those nasty times like that, you don't see a lot of it, so you don't see the same thing, especially in the military, because it's, you're in that military town where everybody is either in the military or they're working in a capacity where they're working for the military. And so that all kind of kept on moving along. So that would have been a rough time. Around a couple of years after that, when I was up for my re-enlistment, was the time that Obamacare was starting to be implemented. We're still kind of coming out of that recession. And I knew I was going to get out and get into insurance because my dad had, had a good career in it. And I thought, hey, I'm going to get out, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to make a couple $100,000 a year, and I'll be really happy. Then I got out and realized, oh, a couple 100,000 a year is scraping the surface. So, and you change from being, the police. I imagine being, in the police force and the military are similar. You get rewarded for, in some ways, but it's a limited version of rewarded for your actions. Whereas insurance for me has been like every corner, your hard work pays off, and you're constantly being rewarded for the things that you put out there, and the good things that you can do and the way you can help people. And so it activated my prey drive, as Coach Burt would say. I think insurance did that for me. And the military was different. It did in some ways, but in a different way. But anyway, coming out of that, in that time where I was up for reenlistment, I took the road of, well, I just had my son, and, I'm married, and I reenlisted out of fear of the non-government, paid world. Now, you're not rich when you're a cop or you're in the military, but you have your health insurance, you have your basic needs met. And so, a lot of times, we were talking about this yesterday with some of the guys that work with me, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? People see that we're making a ton of money and we have big and nice things, and your income is continuing to climb and climb and climb, I'm sure. But we also deal with all the stress of it and none of the even killness of having that, normal American occupation, and there certainly, thank God, we have some, police officers and people in the military and all those things. But knowing what now, I'm sure I'm so happy that I've made that jump and have the freedom that I have, because it is a freeing feeling to feel like my income now is completely dependent on me. Whereas there was a time where that was a very scary thing, and so I'm sure you went through some of that same, concept as you were going in and out of it and seeing the ups and downs of that.
Yeah. And what I didn't know this at the time, but what I've learned is that when you work for somebody else, whether that's the government or an employer, your income is limited. There's a cap on it. Mm-hmm. And the only way to get a raise is to get promoted, or with government, maybe they're nice enough to give you a 1.5% cost of living increase once in a while.
Yeah.
But really, you're limited by what your employer is willing to pay you. Whereas, when you go into business for yourself, and insurance is one of the greatest businesses to start out in, easiest, greatest.
Yeah.
I love the way Galen Hendricks puts it. You can have a raise anytime you want to. Just pick up the phone. Right?
Yeah. I told some of the guys yesterday that, I'm working on my business a lot right now, and we're developing, a lot more of our automation and systems and infrastructure and all the things that we're doing to try to make our downline happier and make our LOA offices happier and take some of the burden off. But I said, if I wanted to make $100,000 by the end of this week, I know I could pick up the phone and do it. I know I could, but I'm also looking at the bigger picture. But like she said, I could pick up the phone and make, more money right now. I just have a vision that requires me to focus on some other things too.
Yeah.
And what you said too, so Dave Ramsey, and I'm not always a fan of Dave Ramsey, but Josh Lustig taught me that you can take things from some people and say, hey, I learned this from them, even though I don't endorse 90% of what they say or do, and I can move on. So one thing I learned from Dave Ramsey was that if you have a job, you're self-employed with one client. That client fires you. Like me and you have, how many clients do you have? A couple thousand.
Yeah.
You have a couple thousand clients, one of them fires you. Oh, well,
Yeah.
if you have a job and you have one client and if they fire you, then, shit, what am I going to do? So It's always good to have multiple clients if you're if you're self-employed with one client. So I liked that analogy. It was in an interview he did with Mark Cuban years ago on Entre Leadership. But yeah, that, that's so true. So for me, it has been freeing. And I mean, I think, just from talking to you, like, I don't think you would go back, unless you absolutely had to. So.
Yeah, no, I'll never work for anybody else again. I'll never have a boss again.
Yeah.
I have 2,000 bosses.
Yeah.
and I like it that way because, if I don't like one, well, I can just, work with the other 900,
1,999. Yeah.
But, something else, going back to that is you get a lot of recruiters and people that send you messages and they'll say something, some silly number about, what you can earn. But I mean, is it realistic to say that a first year insurance agent's going to make, $250,000? It's not realistic, but the fact is that the income potential is unlimited. I mean, it literally is unlimited.
Yeah.
It's only limited by your drive and your capacity to, grow.
Yeah.
So that's what I really love about this business.
Yeah, I do too. It's, that prey drive concept being unlocked by the idea of, being rewarded for each individual action and sale. It put off, and I've seen this happen in other people that I wouldn't consider lions. They weren't like, even like, some people think, oh, you're Marine Corps, you're a cop, you're like alpha male, but not always. Like a lot of times that's more of like it's a patriotic thing. It's a thing where I think like, I want to do this because it's bigger than me. It doesn't mean that I'm like, I was some sort of like, go out and seize the day, conquer the world kind of guy. I was, I'm a Marine, that was wanting to do the best job that I could at what I was doing. But when I went and saw like every time I hit a sale, I had that dopamine come through. You want to talk about a high when you're first starting to sell and you sell something. It was awesome. And I wanted to recreate that as quickly as possible, and as often as possible. And then I found a lot of, I don't know what you call it, and a lot of gratification in getting and training other people to do it and seeing them do it. And then when they, like, I know we have a guy, one of our newer agents, Jackson, was a manager at Hibbett's, but just seeing like him light up as a person from sales and understanding. I don't think a lot of people really understand, like when you're able to get someone to buy, not to trick them into buying something that's not worth it, but when you're able to get someone to trust you. And I mean, it's like fishing with a topwater bait and a bass jumping out of the lake and hitting it all of a sudden. It's like, bam, or killing a deer. I mean, which sounds terrible to people that don't like that, but any of that stuff gives you this big rush, and sales is not much different, like getting a girl to say yes to going on a date with you when you're younger or something. It's all this dopamine rush, and sale, it's all that same concept. So, so I wanted to take that conversation into the seminar aspect a little bit, because I know a lot of people are curious on the seminars, like, some of your results and the evolution of that. So you went to a seminar that a guy was doing, you saw it, and you began to say, well, this is a great thing. And also tee that up, like, I think everyone has to find a lane. So right now we're what we call lead diversified, but we're constantly trying to create more lanes because we have a growing staff to feed. But my first lane that really exploded, I had two. People know these. One, I did get pretty lucky by getting to speak to a large AT&T retiree union that landed me a couple hundred med subs pretty quick out of the gate, about a year in. So that first year I was broke as a joke, but like right at the end of that year, hitting a couple hundred med subs on the books, in one meeting basically, and then following up with them was huge. But then also Facebook, had its heyday. It still works, but it had a real big heyday that we were able to capture some momentum on. The one thing I like about seminars, though, is it doesn't seem, short of COVID screwing it up, which I think is, going away, or whatever people believe with COVID. I don't know. We won't talk about it, but you can probably tell how I feel about it. But, I think that seminars are something that's hard to take away because it's not based on an algorithm online. It's based on people's desire to be educated on a foreign concept as they're going through a pain point in the transition to Medicare. And you've seen a lot of success with it. Now we've consulted you on it, and we're seeing a lot of success with it. You and Brian Askins and Matt Timmon, I give them credit too, because I've learned from all those people that are sharing with that information. But you've been doing it for a while, and it's pretty steady flow for you. And now you're back doing it like COVID never happened, and it's working well again, right? So just maybe you can kind of recap that evolution and, share what you want to share there.
Yeah. So I was broke when I started doing them. I mean, broke.
Yeah.
I didn't have any money. So I started out with a really great little mom and pop FMO up in the Dallas area. And when he told me, he got me to, consider doing seminars, that was great. I said, I can do it, no problem. But how do I get people into the restaurant? And the guy that I learned the seminar from, he literally did all of his own mail. He had been a printer before he got into insurance. That's his story, is he was printing insurance mail for insurance agents and figured, well, I can do this for myself and sell the insurance. So
yeah,
he was literally doing all his mail, paying his grandkids to stuff the envelopes. And I thought, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. He was buying certain printers and paper and envelopes, and there's got to be a way I can just pay somebody to do this. But I didn't have any money. So my FMO at the time, he actually had a little mini mail house in his office with this big fancy expensive machine that printed the paper, stuffed the envelopes, put a stamp on them, and put them out the door. So he actually fronted the money for my first mailer, and I paid him for the next one. So I was always a month behind. He was letting me pay as I go, which was a wonderful thing. I credit him with a lot of my success in this business. And it just got, you send out like 600. I could afford to send out 600 letters, invitations, and for some reason at that time those letters pulled really well. So 600 letters, invitations, would get me 25 people in a room, which, incredible return rate that you don't get anymore. Mm-hmm. And so it's just where it started, making money, and eventually getting bigger. Mail returns started dropping, so we needed to send out much larger mailers, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 invitations to get the same, 25 or 40, 50 people in a room.
Yeah. Now
we use a mail house and postcards and do it a little bit differently. But
it's interesting though, because even when the return rate went down, it's still hyper affordable. Probably one of my least expensive per sale, cost per acquisition lead sources I have. Now it's only scalable to a certain extent. You could go out geographically. It's scalable to the moon if you're willing to go all over the damn place. Yeah. But it's only, there's only so much I can do, like, in an area before I would see the point of diminishing returns. But it's a great staple, and there's definitely enough meat on the bone for somebody to utilize it to get started somewhere. And I tell everybody now, I have a starting from scratch video on YouTube that's a pretty popular one, and I've been thinking about doing a revised version of it, and saying one of the things I would do if I was starting over now is I would go straight into seminars. For sure. I know I would, because it's, there's some other things I would do too. Like I would probably run LIS direct mail and seminars, and the LIS direct mail would be to get some cash flowing in quick, and I would abandon that as quick as I could. But the seminars would be my staple to start building my quality book of business off of.
Yep.
So, but yeah, man, that's awesome. And, the seminar world is vast, and there's a lot of interest in it right now. Coming out of COVID, I think people are anxious to get back out there, and I think clients or prospects are anxious to get back out there. So I think we've actually seen a pretty good result from our mailers because people want to go somewhere. And there's a couple of things we've learned in the process, and I know that you've learned and you've helped us with it. And so, anybody watching this, stay tuned. We might be able to put out some more information about them to try to give you a little bit of a blueprint later on. Me and Ron have been talking about that because it's certainly something that, I don't like to put out any content that somebody could say, hey, this doesn't work, or this is a, fraud or a fake. I only use stuff that I actually use. And seminars is something that if we put it out there and showed you how to do it and you couldn't make it work, then there's something wrong with you, because it's really not that hard. I mean, probably the most difficult part would be, being comfortable speaking in front of people, which is hard for some people, but hey, once you do it a few times, it gets easier and easier. And most people are not looking for a poised professional speaker. They're looking for somebody to share information with them. Also, somebody told me something that made me feel really good about public speaking early on, and said, if I'm talking about Medicare, this is my world. I know Medicare, these people don't. And now if you told me to get up in front of a room of 100 people and talk about underwater basket weaving, I'm going to be uncomfortable. I don't know shit about underwater basket weaving, but if I'm talking about Medicare, it just seems, like I don't have any problem with that. I'm very comfortable with it. So, and I think that would be the same for a lot of people, that you get poised, you understand, more about it than these people, and you're there and you can help them. You can begin to find some solace in that. So, well, Ron, I mean, anything that you would want to add to this? We want to bring these interviews together, talk to people that are in the industry that are doing great things, that come from, humble backgrounds and have built something, off of a couple of ideas and premise and hard work, and just kind of highlight that, people with a regular background of being a cop and working your way up through that can use hard work and become, a great agent that's earning an amazing income, and the sky's the limit. Anything else that you would add to kind of an interview to people that are out there that are watching, that are aspiring agents?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, especially in the day and age that we're in with social media and being able to get all the information that you're able to get, there's tons of courses that you can buy and free information that people like you and Cody and other people put out. And it can be kind of confusing, but it can also be a little, I don't want to say misleading, because nobody's doing it on purpose, but it can be, I don't know what the word is. It can be deceiving maybe, but it's not an intentional deceit. It's just that not everything's going to work for everybody. So there's no silver bullet that works for everybody, but everybody has their silver bullet.
Yeah.
Seminars happen to be my silver bullet.
Yeah.
But for Josh Lustig, what he does, that's his silver bullet. Who else who's using Filipino telemarketers and making $1 million? That's their silver bullet. You just got to keep trying. Don't try one marketing method and it didn't work for you and give up. You've got to keep going, because you'll find it. You just got to be able to hang in there, and it's tough.
It's a
tough
combination of things. People credit me with saying this, but actually a downline agent of ours told me this. He's been at it for a long time. Real successful guy named Chris Burks. Said everything works a little, nothing works a lot. And I say that all the time because, occasionally you find something that works a lot, and then everybody tries to use it, and it can diminish the value of it. And so a lot of times by the time you're learning it, it's already starting to get utilized heavily. It's the reason that your mailer cost went up, was more people started getting direct mail. And so it diminished the impact. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. And also, there's two things here. You have to try something long enough to know that it works. But then you also have to know when it's a waste. And that time is hard for some people. Are instinctively understand it, and they can stomach spending money. So for instance, we use a lot of television. If you go into a market and you start spending money on TV right now, you are going to bleed money for months, but you're inundating your viewers, you're inundating them. And so, we've been running, money and marketing in Memphis right now, trying to expand our branded presence in the Memphis, and weren't getting a lot at all. But yesterday we get a phone call and write 4 applications in Memphis off of it, turning 65. And then the next day we get one from DeSoto County, which is like Northwest Mississippi, right there in Memphis, off of the commercial. And so you start to see it trickle in, and it builds. It's a building, thing. And so, if you're doing any kind of branded media like billboards, TV, radio, a lot of people will tell you, oh, don't do that because you can't monetize it very quickly. But I would tell you, it works. It does work. You just have to be able to stomach, spending the money and not getting the immediate return. And so it's definitely something where somebody has some money to burn for the long-term impact. Then there's other things like Facebook, and Josh Lustig would tell you that he was really close to giving up on some of his Facebook strategies right before he had his breakthrough. And if you've ever read Think and Grow Rich, they talk about 3 feet from gold. I don't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy that owned a mine shaft of some sort of land, and they'd been digging in it for a long time. And he gave up on the land and sold it. And I'm butchering the story, but he sold it to somebody else. The other guy dug 3 feet further and hit a massive, gold find and got rich. And so there's a lot of people that give up 3 feet from gold. But then there's other people that maybe go too far into one channel and they blow a bunch of money. It's just not, like you said, man, it can be deceiving because everything works a little bit, nothing works a lot. And you can't base your endeavors in this industry on the idea that you're going to hit some sort of grand slam home run marketing thing that just rains money on you, because it's not like that. Even seminars is a slow and steady wins the race, thing, I mean,
that's right.
You gotta, because when you do a seminar, Johnny did his first seminar. He went and did one in Alabama. And he's like, I'm not even going to make my money back on this. Well, now it's trickled back in. He's like, I may break even. And I was like, break even when? He's like, well, off of my advances. And I'm like, okay, so that's extremely profitable because we're in a residual market. So, and I was like, that's your first one. Imagine piling them on and then just continuing to get that, residual, especially if you do them in the same areas over and over again. And then you start to get people that are bringing their friends to it and that kind of thing. So, but anyway, yeah, it's seminars seem like right now, like that silver bullet for everybody. And I can tell you, it's probably one of the easiest things once you know some small nuances to just get started and be in front of prospects, and they will come back to you, but it's a pipeline. Mm-hmm. And so you might be writing, like Ron may do a seminar this week, and we have one tonight. We may do a seminar tonight that we write a turning 65, Medicare client or prospect, 6 months from now off of. Yep. Because maybe they're not retiring. They're, so you have to understand you're educating people in the marketplace. Anytime I'm educating my target market, I'm good with that. It doesn't have to be close today, because what you're doing in that close today mentality you're not building relationships, you're not getting referrals, and when you're building like an educational pipeline, the referrals become stronger and stronger over time too.
They do. And that's, the other thing that I love about seminars is I'm not selling anything. I've said this before, and sometimes I catch some flack for it, is I'm not a good salesman. I'm just not, but I am a good educator.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can educate somebody on a topic and then give them a couple of choices and let them make a decision, it takes the pressure off of me. It also takes pressure off of them.
Yeah.
Because it's not an adversarial relationship anymore. Whereas a sales relationship, a transactional sales relationship is adversarial. It's me against you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so think about when you walk, my wife hates to go into a furniture store or car dealership with me because I'm on guard immediately. And I'm like, I'm not going to put up with any of their salesy BS. I don't want you to go talk to the manager. Just give me the car I want and let me get out of here.
Yeah.
4 hours later, I'm wanting to punch somebody in the face.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of transactional relationship that you get when you're a salesperson. But if you're an educator, you're both on the same page. You're both there for the same reason. I'm there to educate you. You're there to get an education. And then I'm going to show you what your options are. And then you just pick the one that makes the most sense to you. I'm not going to tell you what you need, although I really have.
Well, and
in an educational manner.
The sales market is evolving so much too, because, and this also is in Think and Grow Rich, where he's talking about how over time industries have evolved to require employers and marketing strategies to change for the client or prospect, or even like from an employer side, they talk about the employee's benefit, because you have to you have to provide value first, and that's getting more and more and more prevalent. And you see industries that it hasn't completely happened to. So I would say car sales and insurance, evolutionary wise, are in similar places right now. Cars haven't been something that they can sell on Amazon. It's just too big. However, there is some evolution with the Carmigos and the Carvanas and the CarMax and into the process. And there's a point where like that, what you're talking about, I can't stand a showroom. I can't stand it. And so people with, I have a little bit of money. If I'm going to buy a car, I'm probably going to order it online now from Mercedes or wherever I'm going to get it, and just say, deliver it to the local dealership and I'll pick it up. I've already got it paid for. I don't want to deal with that. And so the less people have to deal with it, the better. And it's not to say that I wouldn't buy a car from a person who makes a commission on it. I don't care that they make a commission on it. It's not about that. It's that environment. And so you're right. And I think that the way that you sell by educating is a form of sales. It's just an adaptation of sales where you're educating first and you're utilizing that think you economy approach that Gary Vee talks about, where you are giving the value, and then that some of those people will come to you, or the majority of those people are going to come to you for the service that they need as well, because you've delivered the value.
Right. Yep.
So
I was doing that long before Gary Vee.
Yeah. He actually attended one of your seminars. That's where I wrote the book.
I think so. Yeah.
No, but he's one of the, people that kind of says it, but it's funny. I don't know if you've read Think and Grow Rich, but Napoleon Hill wrote that long time ago. And he was actually saying that markets are evolving in that way, because they did it from an employer-employee standpoint first, with collective bargaining and all that. And he even talks about how some of that was not good for the employer, but the way that it happened. But, basically you got to the point where the employer had to make better conditions. They had to sell the employee on working there, because competition came in and said, hey, well, we're going to have air conditioning in our factory and we're going to pay you 50 cents more. And all of a sudden they're leaving. So it actually created competition. Well, that also happens in from the consumer aspect. It's evolving to the point of where I want to give as much as I can to the consumer. Makes it, and by the way, anybody watching that's trying to get into insurance, this makes it more difficult to do what we do because, we have to provide a process that's better for our agents, because if not, somebody else will and they'll leave. Or we have to provide a process that's better for our clients, because if we don't, somebody else will and they'll leave. You have to give them something. It has to be super personalized local service, or a system that is so good that you're constantly keeping their needs in the forefront of your mind and evolving to that standpoint. And so there are some call center setups that do a great job at this. And then there are some local agents that do a great job at it from their standpoint, where they're that local brick and mortar. There's two ways to do it, but there's still a lot of people doing it a bad way and still making money in it, because we're in an industry that you can actually still do a bad job and make money at what we do if you work really hard at that bad methodology. Because I know some people that are, but I think they're evolving, and that time is coming where more and more and more people are going to find the strong local agent or the really good call center that isn't really just a call center, but more of a local agency nationally.
Yeah.
I mean, case in point, Boomer Benefits. I always bring them up. I mean, they're a call center by all accounts, but they operate like a great local resource all over the country, and they're doing a great job at it. And there's
right. But if you look at the core of what Danielle does, she educates.
She's an educator. Right. Educate.
Yeah, that's why I love, they're obviously huge competitors, but I love what she does.
Yeah, she's doing it the right way. Not the wrong way that a lot of, and that's that call center breed, I think, that's doing it the wrong way is dying. And Medicare is one of the ones that's helped, one of the portions of the our industry that is on the forefront of that, I think, because, I get sold to by PNC call centers and stuff all the time, and they are cutthroat the way that they're calling with their lead systems and stuff. But when you get into Medicare, you got your Spring Venture Group, your Jagger Esch's call center, Medicare Bob was doing, they were all really trying to help the client as much as possible. And so they're a call center, but they're not that sweatshop style under 65 health call center. So, but man, I appreciate you being with us. I think that it's a good conversation, and I'd love to, talk to you more about evolving some seminar education to get things out there to people so that they can start to educate people in person as they're coming back out of their basement. That wasn't a pun to Joe Biden at all, but it sounded like it. But yeah, so Ron, I appreciate it, man. If anybody wants to find Ron, he's pretty active in the Facebook communities online. And you can go, you can check out his agency over at, T65s.com, right?
Yeah, that's the web address. Stands for Turning 65 Solutions. Yep.
T65s.com. It's a great domain. Did you pay a lot for that, or is it just
$11? I just got lucky. I bought it a long time ago.
That T65, almost any domain with only 4 digits in it now is expensive or taken. Yep. So awesome, dude. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, Justin.